Good evening, everyone. I am going to get this started this evening. Wanted to say first and foremost, a thank you to the Pali College Center for having us. My name is Katie Charles, and I'm a college counselor and athletic recruitment specialist with Great Expectations College Prep. Some of you may have seen me present before. I've presented at the Pali College Night, I think 5 years in a row now. So this is nice to be back in front of the crowd, even though if we're not in the actual classrooms and doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's nice to see everybody and, well, almost see everybody. But we'll be looking forward to tonight's presentation. This evening, I'm going to be discussing colleges that are off the beaten path, looking for schools beyond the big names and helping our students find schools that are a great fit for them. This evening, we will have a couple of functions going on in the presentation. If you guys have any questions, and this is going to turn into a question and answer based session as we go along, there is a Q&A function at the bottom. You guys can put any questions that you have in the question and answer section, and our moderators will step in and help with those questions and get them to me as we're working through this. So if anybody needs anything, throw it in the question and answer section rather than the chat so that we can make sure that the moderators see it and I have a chance to answer any questions that you guys have this evening. Starting this off, I gave a little bit of my name. I'll give you guys a little bit of my background. As a college counselor, I have been working here at Great Expectations and in college counseling for over 8 years now. Prior to that, I spent 9 years in higher education and athletics, working at the university level at 4 different schools, everything from small private schools to large state universities. So I've seen a little bit of everything. And so I'm here today to help you guys understanding the college selection process and how to add schools to your lists. Okay. Let's see if it goes. There we go. So first and foremost, the number one thing whenever I'm meeting with students or discussing with them how the college process is going to go, the very first question I ask students when they're starting to decide on colleges, I'm like, so how do you pick the schools that you might be interested in attending? And the number one answer I get from nearly every single student I have ever had is, well, I have a friend who went there and they seem to like it, so that's kind of why it's on my list. So our goal tonight is to help our students understand and get beyond just, well, I know somebody who went there, so that's why it's on my list, and how to take a slightly deeper dive into colleges and searching for them. Being here in Southern California is a little bit of a disadvantage for our students in some capacities, in that 75% of the colleges in the United States are east of the Rockies. I personally grew up in Pennsylvania, where there were about 75 colleges within a 2-hour drive of where I was. So I had the full gamut of schools, a little bit of everything. But out here on the West Coast, as you can see, this adorable map that we have sitting up here gives you kind of an idea of the distribution of 4-year colleges and universities in the US. To be fair, it is fairly based on where the population density is, but at the same time, we start to see a much larger variety of schools the farther east we go. We have some great options for small schools, great options for a variety of schools here on the West Coast. They're just a little harder to find and a little farther in between. The goal for tonight and how we're going to be working through this whole process is I'm going to be giving you guys some information, talking to you a little bit about how best to start the search process, different things you're going to be asking of your students or students you should be asking of yourselves in order to get a better idea for the kind of school that might be the right fit. Okay. And tonight we're going to also be highlighting a couple of schools in each of the regions around the country to help you guys get an idea of what could be out there. The ending of the evening, I'm going to give you guys some resource guides that you can use in order to help you with your search process. But the whole point of this evening is to get you guys thinking about schools that you may never have heard of. I attended one such school, and it's going to be actually on the list this evening. But some of those schools that you may never have heard of have some pretty interesting and unique programming, and we're very much looking forward to presenting some information on those schools to you. There are hundreds of colleges and universities, like I said, that are across the US, and they provide need and merit-based financial aid. The second biggest thing we hear from students here, especially in California, is, we understand the cost factor that goes with UCs and Cal State schools, but the schools out of state are a little bit scarier because they're either private schools or they're schools that will be out of state tuition. But the good news is for a lot of the schools that are east of the Rockies, that right now they are looking to drive more students from California to their schools. And so there are some incentives for both student and merit-based financial aid to help with that. So it's less of a daunting process and allows for more schools to be within the range of reason. Okay. So the next question is then, how do you find these schools? The first thing we're going to talk about with students is, so how do you even create a list of schools? Where do we even start this process? Given that there are nearly 2,000 four-year colleges and universities here in the US, there's obviously an overwhelming amount of things to go through. The first thing that I like to do with students, and part of how we're looking for this, is what we call creating a priority list. It's what are the things that are ultimately going to be important to you in your college selection process. And from there, we can start to do our homework to figure out exactly where we want to go, schools that might be a good fit, and the programming that we're going to be looking for. The number one thing, and this is again with students from California, is do you want to stay close to home, or are you okay with going far away? We found that it's either one or the other. Most students aren't like, well, I don't really care where I go. They either have a pretty strong opinion on, I'd like to stay closer to home or within like a couple of hours drive of Los Angeles, or I would very much like to not be in California anymore. And for those students, they all assume that they'll eventually come back, but for the most part, would like to try something new when it comes to college, okay? The next piece of this, and this will help with where you might want to go, is what kind of a campus am I looking for? Do I like the urban vibe? Am I looking for more of a suburban campus? Would I be okay with being in a college in a small town? And would I be okay with being in a college in the middle of nowhere? And some of this really matters in terms of the different options that you could potentially have. And some of it's really getting a feel for what the campus offers in terms of community life, okay? This is where we jump into the third question here, which is what is going to be important in my college experience? When we're deciding on colleges, it's more than just whatever it is you plan to major in. Clearly, what we're going to be doing inside the classroom is a big piece of it, but outside the classroom is going to be equally important when it comes to networking, job opportunities, and preparing yourself for life after college. And so part of this is figuring out, am I looking for a school that's community service based? Am I looking for a school that offers tons of internship opportunities? What are the factors that will help me decide on where I want to go? And the fourth one being is, what do you want to do outside of the classroom that also furthers your academics? Are you interested in studying abroad? How big of a piece of the education is that for what the schools are looking for? When we're going through all of these different colleges, each school has its own vibe. And that's one of the more interesting things about the colleges is our goal with students, and our goal when we're talking about this, is to help you find the people you want to spend 4 years with. We're looking for programming. We're looking for opportunities. We're looking for study. We're looking for internships. We're trying to help students find the place that they feel will help them go wherever they want to go in life. And it's really difficult because a lot of students start with like, well, is this a good choice or is this the right place? And my answer to every student that goes that direction is, the right choice is the right choice for you. There is really no right or wrong in this. The goal is to find a place where you're going to be happy for 4 years and where you feel like you're getting the education and the life experience that you're hoping to take on from there. As we go through all of this, we're going to talk a little bit about the different and the variety of schools that are going on. Majority of the schools I'm going to highlight this evening are small, what we would consider small schools. So the student population is under 5,000 for undergrad. So mostly because those are the schools that we hear the least about. It's easy to hear about major schools. I mean, anytime you turn on, ESPN, some college with a big name is playing another college with a big name. Those are easily identifiable. Like I said, the goal of the session tonight is to introduce everybody to some schools in different regions that you may never have heard of, but have very unique programming that might be of interest for you. And so starting to figure out how we can help students to broaden their level of interest, okay? So we're going to start off here, and I'm going to be doing this by region. I'm starting on the East Coast because this will be the one that most people will not have heard of, and we'll work our way towards the West as we go. The first set of schools we're going to be looking at are schools that are in the Northeast. For the most part, I characterize this as New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and North. We have a couple of schools that we're hoping to highlight there. And where we go with this is, as we're highlighting schools, one of the biggest misnomers, especially about these schools that are considered smaller schools in the under 5,000 population, is that they either don't offer a full range of majors or they don't have all of the programming that the large schools do. And that's definitely something that is probably the biggest misconception about how schools operate in general. The smaller schools oftentimes have all of the same majors, if not as many or more than the larger schools. And you can work in tandem with them and create majors and all kinds of different exciting things. So we are going to be starting here. Our first school on our list is Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. The reason I chose this school is it has some genuinely unique undergraduate programs, including an undergraduate program in nursing that also allows you to go off into a master's degree. They also offer an undergraduate degree in interior design, which is not often found. They have an on-campus hospitality management program. They have an on-campus hotel and event center where students can get hands-on experience as undergraduates. It is, as you can see, this picture here is actually of their campus. It sits in Beverly, Massachusetts, which is directly across from Salem. So if anybody's a big fan of Halloween, it is right across from Salem, Massachusetts, which is obviously famous for the Salem witch trials. The other big program at Endicott that a lot of students are interested in is their sports business program. So they offer internship opportunities with multiple of the professional sports team in the city of Boston. And so their students, all of their students are required to do some form of internship program. They generally work, nursing students are out doing practicals from their very first semester. Students are out in the field working and learning hands-on from the very beginning of their education. Second school I have on this list is Hamilton College. So Hamilton is considered a small college. It's in Hamilton, New York, which doesn't help you describe very much. If any of you know where Colgate University is, it's about 30 minutes from there. Hamilton College, while a traditional liberal arts college, has some really interesting programming in that it offers an engineering dual degree program. And they have consideration with RPI, which is one of the top engineering schools in the country, and with Columbia's engineering school. So despite being what we would consider a small college with a general liberal arts base, they do offer sciences and they offer strong consideration in engineering. And so their students go off and do engineering after they graduate. The third one on this list, another one worth highlighting, is Skidmore College, which is in Saratoga Springs, New York. For anybody who has ever watched, it's famous for horse racing that goes on there during the summers, but it's a beautiful upstate New York campus. Again, considered a traditional liberal arts school, but some of the unique programming at Skidmore specifically is they have an incredible performing arts program where a lot of their students actually spend their summer in New England at the outdoor performing arts programs and are actively in the Shakespeare in the Park programs. There's a Shakespeare program in Vermont that they are part of. So their students are out and performing throughout most of their career. And the second one that is very interesting there is they offer an undergrad degree that prepares you for physical therapy. They offer kinesiology with an expedited program into physical therapy. So again, while we consider these schools traditional liberal arts schools, for the most part, all of these schools offer hard sciences that prepare you for careers in the sciences after you graduate. Working our way slightly farther south, we are going to head on to my personal bias on this one is the Mid-Atlantic. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so for me, this is home. And the very first school on the list is actually where I went to college. I jokingly tell the story all of the time of how I ended up at this school, and it's a lot to do with, your students will appreciate this, is listening to mom and dad more than listening to what I wanted. When I was searching for colleges, I was very adamant that I wanted to go to a big school in the middle of a city until I visited. And I went to this tiny college in the middle of central Pennsylvania. And before we even made it to campus, I was like, Dad, turn the car around. I'm not going to school here. That's it. And he's like, well, we just drove 2.5 hours. So we're getting out of the car. And once I was walking around on campus, I absolutely fell in love with it. And even though it was very different from where I thought I wanted to be, it ended up being a great fit. And so I'm highlighting it here for you guys so you understand it. The first one here is Juniata College in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to Huntingdon. The unique thing about Juniata is that it has what we call programs of emphasis rather than majors. It allows you to design your own major. It assigns you advisors so that you can actually create your own programming and the degree that you're looking for. They have all of the standard degrees, everything from the hard sciences to business to traditional degrees, but they also allow you the flexibility to create your own programming. For students, especially that are out here that are very interested in environmental science, they have a several thousand acre environmental science campus that includes housing. So you can actually be doing research at the environmental science station and living out there while you're doing it. It's its own community associated with the school. They also have one of the few programs around the country in peace and conflict studies. You're gonna see that pop up. It's a very popular major right now. Students are certainly looking more to it as we're looking at how the world is going at the moment. And it is a program that has traditionally had that major for close to 40 years. And so it's one of the founding programs for peace and conflict studies in the US. The next school I'm gonna highlight is slightly farther south in just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is Dickinson College. Dickinson College is, again, actually originally associated with the War College, which was our military institution prior to the academies being a piece of this. But Dickinson broke off and is now its own school. It is heavy in the liberal arts again, with a strong base in the sciences. This is another school that offers the 3-2 programming and engineering. So for a lot of students that are considering engineering programs, they're generally looking at the larger land grant state schools because engineering is a big piece of it. But a lot of these smaller schools offer associations. Again, Dickinson's primary associations are with Columbia and RPI and Case Western Reserve University into their graduate engineering programs. So you spend 3 years as an undergraduate on their campus and then have a 2 years master track program that allows you to continue on into engineering and finish with your master's in 5 years. And the final school on this list on the list for this region is Stevens Institute of Technology. Sounds very strange, doesn't really sound like a college, but I promise that it is. This is a much more urban-based campus. The school is in Hoboken, New Jersey. So if any of you have ever watched the TV show Cake Boss, it is right down the street from there. It overlooks Manhattan. It sits directly on the Hudson River. And it's about a 10-minute path ride into Manhattan proper, which gives this school a lot of unique opportunities. Stevens offers, similar to some of the bigger schools like Northeastern, a 5-year co-op program. So you can take a year of paid internship or a year of study abroad and some other items. And they actually count that towards your degree, and you can do it as a paid internship. The other big piece of this is Stevens is known for having the highest starting salary for graduates upon graduation. And so they are a unique program, again, considered to be primarily a science and technology school for a very long time. They also offer business, arts, and letters as additional majors. And many of their students will intern or work in New York City since it's so close. The school has a wonderful networking opportunity, and they are excellent at job placement, as nearly 90% of their graduates have a job within a year of graduating or on to graduate school. Okay. I'm not sure if there's a question in the chat. No, we lost Karen. It's okay. All right, moving down as we're heading down the coast, we're going to start with the battle of beautiful campuses down here. There are quite a few schools. The Southeast region has some excellent options down there, many that you've probably heard of. Some of the bigger schools that we come across, and some schools that are really popular in Southern California are in this region. Primarily Emory is the one that usually comes to mind for most people. But in that same relative area, we have a bunch of additional schools that are just really strong in everything. And some of them are more city-based schools. So again, the first one I want to highlight in this group is Rhodes College. So Rhodes is actually in Memphis, Tennessee. It is one of the schools around the country that is very much a student research, student experience-based school. In fact, they actually require you to either complete some form of research with a professor, an internship, or a study abroad in order to graduate. So it's not like students can just go in, take classes, and graduate. It's much more hands-on. It requires the students to be much more focused on the outcome of where they're going after they graduate. And it's a great school in terms of they're very, very active, very, very hands-on, and the students get a lot of experience before they graduate as it's part of their graduation and curriculum requirements. The next school down on this list is Berry College in Mount Berry, Georgia. The picture to the right is actually their campus. They have been voted, it's been between them and a school that's actually going to pop up a little bit later on our list for most beautiful college campuses in the country for quite a few years. It's just outside of the Atlanta area that sits up towards the Tennessee border with and out in the like halfway between the city and the mountains. So this is what we would consider a small town campus. Student population is medium sized. They're, well, what I would consider medium sized. They're about 3,000 students. And so they are on the bigger end of the small college spectrum, but not huge. There are slight differences in terms of how they handle things. This is one school that is considered traditional liberal arts that actually offers undergraduate degrees in education. So a lot of times the education in terms of teacher certification isn't something that's part of the general liberal arts curriculum, but Berry College has it as an undergrad, and they also offer the master's in teaching, so students can go straight through and graduate with their master's degree from Berry in education. They also offer the traditional Bachelor's of Arts and Bachelor's of Science degree, as well as a Bachelor of Music. And so they have some very strong arts programs, and their programming is tailored towards graduate degree and towards their students moving on. The final one on here, if we're in the South, we got to get something that is very traditionally Old South, and that is Washington and Lee University. It's in Lexington, Virginia. So if anybody is a Civil War fan, the name of the town will sound familiar. It is very much what you think of when you think of the South: big pillared buildings, Old South feel. And it is one of the schools that, again, is considered traditional liberal arts, but they have their own school of business, commerce, and economics. And so they have an entire wing of their school, an entire college that's dedicated to political science, to business, and to economics. A lot of their students end up eventually working in DC. They're heavy into study abroad, heavy activists in terms of students that will internship in a variety of State Department roles. They'll work in civic roles in DC. And so because their campus isn't super far away, they have the opportunity for their students to be participating, especially in summer programming in the greater DC area. So if you're thinking about political science and you don't necessarily want to be in a hotbed of a city, Washington and Lee is an excellent option for that. All right, we're moving our way across the country here. We're heading to yet another school that I had a wonderful opportunity to be a part of, and that is Kenyon College. Like Berry, this is the other school on this list that's been vying for most beautiful campus in the world. Most beautiful campus in the country, although it did make one of the most beautiful campus in the world lists a few times. Kenyon College is, interestingly enough, known as a top school for performing arts. Current actors and actresses, Paul Newman, for those of us who ever saw him perform, Allison Janney, who's in quite a few things right now, are all graduates of the school. Their performing arts program and their literary programs. They're English majors. They have an on-campus literary magazine that the students publish that is considered one of the top in the nation of literary magazines and is annually awarded for that. They also have a great science program. So this is a school that does a little bit of everything. They have a 95% acceptance rate into medical school after graduation. So their students really do run the gamut, and they're able to do a little bit of everything there. Moving on to McAllister, depending on how much you like snow, McAllister is a relatively urban campus based in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. It's in St. Paul, on the St. Paul side of Minneapolis-St. Paul split. It is the school, actually, if you are interested in international study, if you are interested in humanitarian work, they are actually one of the primary schools for that. More than 70% of their student population studies abroad at some point during college. So they are super active in terms of their global citizenship and responsibility. It is actually one of the primary missions of the school. So if study abroad is something that's really integral to you, or you're really hoping to have more of a global experience, then McAllister would be a wonderful option. Got to be willing to deal a little bit with the cold weather up there, but across the board, it's just a wonderful institution. And then my next school on this list is the one that usually gets people to giggle a little because the name is a little bit out there, but Morehead State University in Kentucky. This is actually a larger institution. They're looking more like 15,000 students. But the program here, we have a lot of students that are interested in the MITs and the Caltechs of the world for, potential for space science or for engineering. Morehead State University, even though most people have never heard of it, actually has a NASA-associated satellite program on campus because it is up in the mountains of central Kentucky. They actually have observatories on campus. They work with NASA, so a lot of their undergraduate as well as graduate students will work with the NASA program directors and get undergraduate research that allows them to go to work for the space science programs. They have a tremendous program there. I actually have a student that's there right now. She's one of the first from California, so they're very excited. But this program that they have that they have is comparable to the programs that you see at Caltech. in terms of the astrophysics and the association with NASA. So it's a slightly different school, a little bit larger. So if you didn't want that small school feel and you were okay with a rural campus versus Pasadena, Morehead State would be a really good one to consider, especially for space sciences and engineering. Moving our way across the country, we're getting to some of the more interesting ones. These are some smaller colleges that are out heading our direction a little bit. The first one on this list is actually Colorado College in Colorado Springs. This is actually one of my favorite schools in the country to highlight. I've been there, it's beautiful. Colorado Springs is lovely, and there's quite a few different schools there. So the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs is there, the United States Air Force Academy, but Colorado College is a small private school, and it has one of the most unique academic plans of anywhere in the country. Colorado College does block scheduling. You take one class for 3 weeks at a time, and it's intensive study. They offer January term, so you can take an additional class. And a lot of their students will use that January term to take a class like overseas. So you can take an art history class in Italy, or you can take an internship and count it as your 3-week class. They do some very unique programming. So at the end of your semester, you've still taken 5 classes the way most college students have, but you've taken them intensively for several weeks. It allows the professors to dive more in depth. It allows them to focus daily on the same subject. And it's been touted as one of the coolest academic programs that we've found at most colleges. So moving along, if you're okay with in the windswept Midwest, Grinnell College in Iowa is kind of it sits very different. There's not a ton of 4-year colleges in the state of Iowa. The 2 land grant states are what everybody knows, and that's the University of Iowa and the Iowa State University. And sort of in between the 2 of them is Grinnell. And Grinnell is, again, about 2,500 students. It's on the smaller side. And they're, again, a traditional liberal arts school, however, with a major focus in engineering. You're starting to see a pattern here. A lot of these small liberal arts colleges have engineering or hard sciences that they work with simply because they have great associations after they graduate. Even though they're out in the middle of Iowa, Grinnell's major associations for graduate school include Columbia and Caltech. So their engineering program students are out working in a variety of places afterwards, and their 3-2 program allows you to take 3 years of undergrad at Grinnell again, and then a 2 years master's program at several of the schools, like I said, including Caltech and Columbia, and finishing with your master's in engineering in 5 years. A lot of places you don't get to do the accelerated programming. So an engineering degree generally will take 6 years. This is 1 year less in the accelerated programs. And our third school on this list is actually what the picture is here on the right. We have a lot of students out here on the West Coast that are really excited about Austin, Texas. So the University of Texas at Austin is there, but a school with 60,000 students isn't always the right fit for everyone. So an alternative that's in the same area and equally as pretty is Southwestern University, which is in Georgetown, Texas. It's about 30 miles from Austin. This school actually has a ton of programs similar to traditional liberal arts. They offer multiple master's degrees, including education and theology. So if anybody is interested in doing their master's in theology, you can track yourself right into it from Southwestern University. Originally founded by the Methodists, it's not technically a religious school, but they do offer a variety of courses in theology. All right, we're making our way out here. Next school up on this list is Reed College. So Reed, a lot of people have heard of it, but don't know too much about it. Reed is actually a small college directly in Portland, Oregon. It's known for being a little bit quirky, and the students that go there are generally very passionate about everything that they're doing. It's actually one of the cooler, quirkier, more fun campuses of students that I've ever witnessed. They require all freshmen to take mandatory programming in the humanities. So even though they're a strong science-based school, they require their students to have a strong background in the humanities and a strong background in speaking and writing. So they are preparing their students as best they can for the future. And it's right in the middle of downtown Portland. But secluded enough that it feels like a campus, but in the middle of the city enough that you can take advantage of everything that's going on in Portland. The next school on our list is the University of Puget Sound. So this one is up in Tacoma, just outside of Seattle. So again, the University of Washington is generally a pretty popular school for students here to apply to. The University of Puget Sound is worth considering as it's in almost the same area. The University of Puget Sound has always been test optional. It's actually one of the things that they tout. They are very much a holistic read process, and they generally are not as concerned about test scores. So even though a lot of schools are going back to requiring testing in the future, Puget Sound has always been test optional. They are a school that, again, has strong programming, especially in pre-med. They have associations with the University of Seattle Medical School, and a lot of their students will continue on in those programs after they graduate. The third one on this list is another one of my favorites, and the picture to the right is actually this school. It is Willamette University in Oregon. So Willamette is on the 40 colleges that change lives. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you guys some resources you can check out. That book is actually one of them. Willamette is really well known, again, for student experience, especially as undergrads. So looking for, they're big on study abroad. They're about 70% of their student population studies abroad. They're just outside of the capital of Oregon. So they have a lot of students that work, especially in local politics. They're actually one of the schools that encourages learning how to organize locally versus nationally. And so they do a lot of work with that. They offer a peace and conflict studies program. And they, again, offer all of the hard sciences. So even though, again, traditional liberal arts, they are another program that does a strong in the pre-med and in the sciences department. All right, now we're making our way down here to Southern California. Well, California. We'll skip the southern part because there is one up in Northern California. But a couple of schools out here that we are looking at, we have a lot of students here in Southern California, especially, that are looking for film programs. USC is usually the one they think of. A lot of people will talk about UCLA, but the one that most people don't know as much about until you tell them, it's Chapman University. It's not an easy program to get into, but their film program is outstanding. A lot, and they are pulled from a lot, especially since their students, it is generally an undergrad experience. And so their undergraduates have an opportunity to do internships in the film industry. They're incredibly hands-on with how their academics go. And that program itself is one of the top in the country. It's not far behind the USCs of the world when it comes to the film school. And so Chapman, just down in Orange, is another one of the ones where if our students are considering film, this is one that we highly recommend to a lot of them. As we talked earlier about the sciences, when you're looking at the MITs of the world and when you're looking at some of those bigger schools for the engineering and sciences, the one that generally gets overlooked here, even in Southern California, is Caltech. So Caltech, well, maybe now theoretically a little bit famous from the TV show The Big Bang Theory, actually is a school that is heavy on physics. So a lot of the, especially the engineering schools, the emphasis isn't necessarily straight to physics. Caltech is, every student has to have a strong score in physics. They used to require the SAT subject test. Clearly they no longer do, since the SAT is not offering those, but they are looking for students that have had physics at a high level in high school. And they are most well known for their astrophysics program. Caltech has observatories that they use, including one out in Hawaii. So students actually get an opportunity to go out and go to some of the major observatories. So if you're in any capacity interested in space sciences or astrophysics of any kind, Caltech is one of the premier institutions in the entire world for it. And the final school I have on our list from out here at the moment is the University of San Francisco. And that's actually the picture on the right. While it's a super urban campus in San Francisco, it is absolutely stunning. Most of our students here in Southern California, we get a ton of kids that are looking for, they're looking at LMU, they're looking at the University of San Diego, they're looking at a lot of similar institutions to the University of San Francisco. And this is another school that goes along with that group. And so it's often overlooked because most students are looking at the more local options, whereas University of San Francisco is a very similar institution to all of those, and it offers hard sciences. It's an urban-based campus. It's a slightly larger school. And so this one ticks a lot of the boxes for students that are generally interested in a school with a more urban feel, but has some of the same characteristics of the medium-sized schools like a USD or an LMU. So while we're working through all of this, it's just a brief overview. So you've gotten a couple of schools from East Region, and what we're going to do next is kind of open this up to you guys to ask some questions. If you're looking for a type of school or a specific major, please feel free to ask, and I'll be happy to suggest. I'm not like an almanac or encyclopedia of any of this, but I'd really like to give you guys an opportunity to see if there's a way that we can help you. There are additional resources that I would very much like to recommend so that you can help broaden your horizons when it comes to the college search process. The first one on there is actually one that we recommend to all students we work with, and that is the Fisk Guide to Colleges. Unlike some where they just rank schools, this one actually gives information about student experience. It gives information about outcomes post-graduation. It really talks a lot about what the schools are like and who they are versus so much specific information to academics. It really helps students with a little more of an overview of what it's like to be a student there versus the academic side of things. The second book I actually recommend to all students, no matter what your grades are, is The Best Colleges for B Students. What this does, this guide actually, I have a copy of all of these here in case anybody needs to see them. You can order them on Amazon. Best Colleges for B Students. The one thing I really love about that is a great set of schools that talk a lot about the financial aid aspect. So if you're a really great student and you're a 4.0 student, but getting academic aid is going to be important to you, the Best Colleges for B Students points out a lot of schools where they give significant need or merit-based financial aid. And so if you're a great student, a lot of times you can get a significant amount of your financial aid covered because you've done the work all the way through. And the Best Colleges for B Students has some unique ones that don't come up in a lot of other guides. Third recommendation, and Karen might be able to chime in here. Are these books available by any chance in the College Center?
Yes, they are.
Excellent. Don't worry, you guys are on there as my option for everybody needs to come see you as well. The third book on this list is The 40 Colleges That Change Lives. Again, it's done by regions, sort of how my presentation was this evening, but highlights again a bunch of schools that offer genuinely unique student experiences and the kind of information that helps you gauge what it would be like to actually attend the school, even more so than what it's like to be a student there. Okay, so more than just the academics, we're really looking for the life piece of this. The fourth one on the list is actually the U.S. Department of Education has put together a mapping system. So this map that you guys saw in my very first slide back at the beginning, there is this website right here, and I'm actually going to send this. I think Karen has a copy of the slides, maybe. If not, I will email it to her later tonight, where you guys can give this out. And what you can do is actually put into this map. It gives you the option to filter it by four-year schools, by two-year schools, by majors they offer, by size of campus. And it can really help you narrow down and show you where the most options would be for the types of schools that you are looking for. And my final option on here is your Pali High College Center. You guys have some genuinely wonderful guidance counselors that can help with a variety of needs. But the key is to get in there early and often, right, Karen? So they know your face.
That's right. Right.
And making sure that you guys have an opportunity to really get to know your guidance counselors, because they are going to be a very integral piece of your college process. And you guys have some tremendous ones at your school. So I generally recommend getting in there as early as possible so that they know who you are and they can help guide you through your process.
I want to thank Katie for her presentation. We are working with the seniors now. Any juniors that may be present, we start working with the juniors in early spring. So when we get back from Christmas break, we call out all the juniors in a big group meeting in their English classes, tell them the steps, and then we start meeting with them one-on-one. It's a great process, but you do have to start early. We wish we could start meeting with students in 9th and 10th grade, but at a large public school with 3,000 students, that's not possible. I like this webinar series because it's an opportunity for a lot of parents to get some great information in like a nutshell. These recordings, all of them will be recorded and put up on the Pali website. So it's something you can go back to. If you forget something or you just want to see it again, it's really helped us out with what we're dealing with, you know, since COVID. It's worked out really, really well. So if there's any questions for me or Katie, we're here.
But it looks like we do have a couple people in the Q&A section. And a big hope for tonight is juniors, if you're in here, you'll be armed with some additional schools that you can go talk to your counselors about. And seniors, if you haven't finalized your list yet and you're still looking for something maybe a little bit different, hopefully tonight gave you guys an idea of just some of the possibilities that might be out there that can really help you expand where you might want to go and find exactly the perfect fit for you.
I want to answer one of the questions. Someone asked, what's your opinion of Marymount University in Palos Verdes? I live not too far from that school. Excellent. And I recently heard that it just got purchased by a school from Florida. Not sure if it's Stetson University, but one of those universities, smaller universities in Florida, actually bought Marymount University. So if it were my son and daughter, because of the instability I've seen since living in I live in San Pedro, so it's right, it's like 10 minutes from my house. I wouldn't, it wouldn't be on at the top of my list. Let's say that. Because they've had some financial troubles, to be honest.
All right. Well, if you want, I can hop in and answer a couple of these. We did have somebody ask, are most of the schools that I covered today test optional? As of right now, most of the schools are test optional and will continue to be through this graduation year. We will revisit that for the class of 2023. It's a matter of whether or not the schools choose to stay test optional or not. Quite a few of them very likely will. But it's more of a consideration right now. Like we did highlight a couple that have always been test optional. But right now, majority of the schools on this list are test optional. So yes, to that answer. And if you're a junior, we'll be able to revisit that next year and let you know whether or not they're still test optional. We're a little unclear. I don't know how your students have been doing with it, but a lot of students I've talked to have continued to have testing canceled. Most of the schools are going to continue to stay in the test optional mode until things stabilize in terms of the ability to take the exams. So as we move through that. Okay, so next question on this list. Moving my way up is my daughter's looking for some schools to add to the lower part of her list, ones that might be easier to get into. She would like to leave California and she'd like to be in bigger than Pali, ideally 5,000 to 10,000 students. Do any of the schools that we talked about tonight fit that criteria in terms of size? Yes, several of them actually do. Yeah. And again, sometimes a lot of the schools we did highlight were on the smaller side, one, because they're harder to find. However, if you have any questions about schools that might fit in that, this would be a great question to go see your Pali High College Center, especially if your daughter is currently a senior, and they can help you with some of the ones that meet this criteria that go in that mid-range. Morehead State is one that I highlighted. That one is considered a larger state school. I believe there are about 15,000 students. That one is, like I said, on the larger side. The University of San Francisco, although not outside of the state of California, is larger and in that ideal fit of 5,000 to 10,000 students. Like I said, it would be nearly impossible to try to highlight all of the schools out there. So we're kind of working our way through this as much as possible. But that's sort of the next stage of all of this. All right, well, and there's one question down here at the bottom that clearly they looked at my profile on the way in, is where can I find information about athletic admissions processes? So interestingly enough, I will be giving a second presentation for the Pali College Center on athletic recruitment. But this is one of those things where if you needed it, you could certainly reach out to our office and they can connect you with me to have a conversation, or with Jen. Athletic recruitment is its own bird, is the best way I can put it, in terms of it may or may not affect admission status. It may or may not affect how you go about the actual application process, depending on when you start. There are a lot of variables that go into the actual athletic recruitment process. And so that's certainly something you're going to want to talk to somebody who really knows athletics. And we will be hosting a presentation, Karen, next 2 weeks, I think.
Yes.
2 weeks.
I don't have the whole agenda, the whole group of topics in front of me. Is actually in the trunk of my car right now. But yes, you can go on the Pali website. You can look up the flyer where you registered for this one, and it has a list of all the webinars that we'll be offering. And I also want to mention that in the past, before COVID, at a college fair, Katie was one of our athletic presenters. So she's not new to Pali. She's done presentations for us before, and she's actually our go-to person. We can tell you about 16 core courses. Take a look at your transcript. We try to steer ourselves away from saying, yes, you're NCAA eligible. We'd like for you to hear that from them, but we can tell you about the courses that's required, D1 versus D2, certain things like that. But you really need to talk to someone that specializes in athletic recruitment. And that would be, and not, trying to push anyone on Katie, but you just want to talk to someone, attend that webinar to learn a little bit more about it. Because it's its own beast in itself.
And that's coming on Tuesday.
We have 2 people on staff now that do athletic recruiting. I'm not alone anymore. So.
Right. And it's changed. I just came back from a conference where I actually attended athletic recruitment, one of their many, I guess, seminars that they offered for us. And because of COVID, they've relaxed a couple of their rules, they said. I don't have all the info on that because they wait and then they say it'll be accessible to all of us. But you really want to make sure you have someone look at that transcript, go over it, understand the recruiting timeline, all of that. It's very key to athletic recruitment.
With athletic recruiting, there is NCAA eligible, and then there's eligible to get into college. And so these things all have, there's different standards. And so we would, well, like I said, we have an entire event where we're going to talk all about this. But Karen's right, I'm actually revamping the presentation as we speak because the NCAA has, for the 475th time in the last year and a half, changed their rules. So we will be moving things along. And if there's ever a question you guys have, Karen has my direct contact, and she and I can go back and forth to help with anything that you guys might need on that front. So, all right, I'm moving my way down the list. The next question is, you mentioned what these schools do best. Is this information in one of the books you recommended? Yes, this information is all readily available in the FISC guide, in the best colleges for B students. It's also available on their websites. So the schools do a pretty good job of touting what they do really well. They're pretty excellent at that. So we can move that one along. But yes, this information is all available in the guides that we use and on the websites for each of the individual schools. So, and for each of the guides, all of the schools that they highlight and talk about, they will include those kinds of information, special programs, things that are of note, how they operate. They will give you all of that information. Okay. All right, moving down to the next one is, how do you feel about LMU? My child has no idea what he wants to do yet, as probably many do at this point. So difficult to choose one that focuses on a specific career like business. Also, is there a survey where kids can fill out a questionnaire which may help them choose a career or study focus they might like? So when we're kind of attacking this in general, the current statistics tell us that 75% of college students will change their major at least once. So when we're talking about the application process and we're talking about colleges, some students come in 100% sure about what they want to do, and whether or not they actually end up doing that over the long term or not, the numbers tell us that most of them do not. However, a lot of students go in and aren't 100% sure. For most colleges, you're not actually going to be delivered directly into the major unless you're in what we call a progression-based majors. Those are usually nursing, engineering, anything that requires you to take courses in a certain order. Those are the only ones where you would track immediately into your major. Most schools require a set of core courses, so you're going to have to take multiple courses from a variety of different disciplines. And so no matter what you choose in terms of the major, most of that has to do with the supporting documents we're going to be looking for and the way you're going to be presenting your application. Once you're at the school, for the most part, again, unless you're in an incredibly specific major of some kind, pardon me while my cat decides to disturb us on the Zoom call, most schools will let you change. A lot of what they do with the majors is try to figure out how much resource allocation they're going to need for the incoming class, how many students we're taking, how much room do we have for those students. And so if your student isn't 100% sure, they can either look at going undecided, which is potentially possible, or choosing a major that they are interested in based on what their current high school interests are. So if they're somebody who really enjoys history or English, there are a variety of majors, anything from sociology to history majors to English majors that might work for them. And so we can help, and the guidance office can also help you guys make some decisions based on things you may be interested in studying. Okay.
Another part of that question, is there a survey where kids can fill out a questionnaire which may help them choose a career, study focus, or something that they might like? We do have a questionnaire that students fill out. It's more like the senior questionnaire, providing us with information that we require in order to write the letter of recommendation. But in the spring, if you're, I don't know if this is a junior or senior parent, but on Naviance, which is the system that we use to get all your information to colleges, like your transcript and all your Common App documents, within that system, there's something called a Career Interest Explorer. There's also a Strengths Explorer. So you can do those 2 surveys. It's built into the system. If you do not have access to Naviance just yet, in the spring, we'll be giving it to all juniors. So don't start emailing me tomorrow for your Naviance code. We may be able to do it shortly after Thanksgiving. We're hoping we can. So you guys will have it to use over Christmas break. But right now, we had so many early decisions, early actions for seniors. We cannot focus on emails to activate Naviance, but I'm working with the parent and maybe we'll be able to provide that to you sooner. But yes, there are surveys built into that system.
Excellent. All right. And the next one down, which of the colleges you covered would be good for students who doesn't have a clear idea of what they want to study?
Any of them.
Any answers, any of them. A lot of these programs, especially, and this is, I'm going to sound, my bias of attending a small college is going to show here, is because these schools do not have huge student bodies, they're significantly more flexible with how they handle their students. A lot of them offer design programs, so you can actually go in and design your own major. You'll work with your advisors, and it'll really help the students find themselves. And that's the nice thing. At the student body at the smaller school, Karen is saying, when you have 3,000 students and only a couple of people in the office, it's hard. It's the same when you go to a bigger school, is whether or not you have access to those kinds of resources. It is actually the beauty of some of the smaller colleges. They're not dealing with graduate students. They're not dealing with huge student bodies. They are dedicated to just the small set of students they have on campus. And so there's a significant amount of hands-on help. And again, some students love it, and some students love the autonomy of the big school and helping them figure out what is the best school for them and what is the best experience for them.
And to add to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of the colleges that Katie mentioned. My son actually attended Dickinson College. Roughly about 1,700 students at the time, didn't have a clue what he wanted to study. Amazing student. He went there. He ended up studying philosophy. He's not the one that needs to make a lot of money, but what he really liked, he took Japanese as his language class, and he did a lot of work with International Studies Department and studied Japanese. He's now working as a person for Spectrum Entertainment that hires producers from all around the world, and he absolutely loves his job. My niece attended Reed College, and she went in as an art history major. She eventually became one of the deans of admissions or something for Reed College. She's married, never came back from Portland, absolutely happy, loved it there. She's the kind of kid, when you say quirky, loves art history and just knowing things that she could answer probably any trivia question on. She's that kind of student. From Chadwick High School, that's where she went to high school, and she absolutely loved it there. So I think almost all of these schools, even the larger ones, for students that aren't clear on what they want to study, when I talk to those students in the College Center, I actually admire that in a way, because most of the ones that are clear are probably STEM majors, and they know exactly what direction they're going in, or they have parents that do something, so that's all they know, and they haven't had time to explore. Attending college is a time for self-exploration, to find out what it is you really want to do and study. So don't worry about that. When they don't know, it's a good sign that they're ready to find out. And that's why you go to college sometimes.
I always kind of joke about it, is I went to college thinking I was going to major in business because that's just what everybody majored in when you went to college in the early 2000s. I ended up triple majoring in none of business. I triple majored in peace and conflict studies, political science, and economics, got to design my own program, ended up studying abroad in college in Brussels, Belgium, and I interned for the European Parliament for 6 months. And so I actually went to Brussels, worked for the Latvian government while they joined the European Union. So it was a super cool experience. And I was an athlete in college. I came home and won a national championship in Division III. So I personally love this kind of conversation, because for me, the uniqueness of each one of these schools is the thing that I love about them. It's about finding your people, about finding the community that's going to foster your children, or those of you that are actually in here who are students, helping you figure out who you want to be when you graduate, because I'm sure all of you parents love your kids, but you're hoping they don't live in your basement till they're 40. And so what we're looking for is schools that help them grow up, help them get out there and do big things in the world and help them to really have a fulfilling experience that gives them the skills they're going to need, more so than just what's in the classroom, but everything they're going to be doing outside of the classroom too. And so the schools that we're highlighting here are all programs that really are known for nurturing their students, helping them to move beyond graduation and to be ready for the next stages of life. So Dickinson, there's a rivalry.
Another question about it's what's your opinion on sending a child to a local junior college first? Example, SMC for a year or two to knock out the core classes, not only to save money, but maybe to use the time to grow up and figure out what they might want to do or where to go. That is very typical of many Pali students. It's a great idea. It does save money. They do grow up. And for those who may have not had their best performance in high school, I have what I call it a do-over. It's a chance for a do-over. You know, if you want to have stronger grades, if you want to go to a UCLA and say you're at a 3.7 or 8 or 5 or 2, and it didn't get you in there the first time, many students opt to do that. And I have students that have actually started taking SMC classes because they already know by 10th grade that that's probably what they're going to do. And they have gone to SMC, and actually I have one student that, there's more, but one in particular who graduated from UCLA, double majored, and came out a year early. So she graduated a year before her classmates that actually went directly there. So it's another very viable option.
Across the board, the two-year colleges here in the state of California are excellent. And a lot of them have great acceptance rates into some of the top schools too. And for a lot of students, it's an underutilized resource as far as I'm concerned. There are quite a few students who could really use the time to bring up their grades to have their best showing, because these are students that maybe struggle through some of their earlier years. And I mean, as Karen said, so many can get ahead in classes and are able then to go to these very top schools that they're looking for. And they can graduate early, which saves everybody money. Always happy about that. So. All right, we have one. Any recommendations for lesser known schools with merit-based scholarships? So every school I actually mentioned tonight offers merit-based scholarship. Most of the smaller private schools, nearly every single school offers some form of merit-based scholarship. Simply because, again, a lot of the private schools, that's a big piece of their financial aid. They consider it, in the state of California, most of you will apply for FAFSA, which here in California, we don't generally get a lot because cost of living here is so much higher than everywhere else in the country. But most of these private schools offer, they consider financial aid differently. So both need-based financial aid is a little bit easier to get. They actually take into account cost of attendance and cost of living when they're deciding what is affordable for a family. And they offer, most of them offer merit-based scholarships that bring the price of their college down to be in line with what state schools are. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any students. People just couldn't afford to go there overall. And so a lot of these schools, in fact, every school I listed on here offers some form of merit-based scholarship. And so do a lot of schools. The only place it's really harder to get merit-based scholarship, obviously, is at bigger schools because the pool of students going for those scholarships are larger. At the smaller school, it's a smaller pool. And that's really what it comes down to. It's more of a numbers game. All right. Any junior colleges in West LA? SMC is obviously a really strong one. El Camino College, I've had students that have had an excellent experience there.
And West LA College.
West LA College. This is the one whose name is on the board. So yes, those three, and a lot of them are, like I said, have associations with UCLA, with the UC campuses, with USC. Tons of the graduates will go out from there and be able to matriculate into some of those top schools because they have a great relationship with those junior colleges.
And many of the schools, and I can speak for UCLA because it's one of the programs I worked with when I was there, they have reps that actually go to recruit students from those schools. They have a whole program where they go out, just like the reps come to Pali for their college visits from the four-year schools. They send out reps from UCLA, USC, all the surrounding colleges to those community colleges to recruit students or help them with apps or essays or all of that.
Mm-hmm. All right. And the final question on there was, are there private 2-year colleges? And to be fair, I do not know the answer to that. Karen, is that one?
Marymount used to be one of them.
Yeah.
Marymount used to be one of those private 2-year colleges. I'm not as familiar with many private 2-year colleges because our public free one is so accessible and much better than the private 2-year one.
And most of the private ones have moved to 4-year schools. It's just a more sustainable model. And so we don't, like I said, so far as I know, there aren't any that I know of off the top of my head. Doesn't mean that there aren't, but it's certainly not the most sustainable model. So my guess is we are moving away from that.
Right. Even Marymount, that's one that went to 4-year.
They did.
Yeah, they used to be.
All right.
Okay, I think we're good, Katie.
Well, if there's anything you guys need, Carrie knows how to get a hold of us. And we have presentations coming up for the next couple of weeks. It looks like there's in the chat, I believe Lorraine put in, there's the calendar that shows you all the places you can sign up and all the different presentations. Take advantage. There's a variety of different things to learn from here. And we're very excited to answer all your questions. Like I said, you guys have a wonderful college counseling office. So, use your resources wisely and help them out. And if you need anything, we are here.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.